Hey everyone, it's Time Spiraled. We're back with the third MSEM set review video. We're at Anachrond Reforged. I have, I believe, seen this set come around twice. This might be the third time that this set has been submitted to MSEM 2. There's a lot of information here in the set details that its designer Scribbl wrote down. There were aspects of the set that I remember giving feedback on, and thankfully Scribbl has offered us a changelog, so I'll have that on the side where I can reference it. I'm not going to read through all this. This would be a lot, and as we've noticed, I am just not able to land these sub 1 hour videos, but I will try to get it around an hour. So real quick, archetypes you can expect in Anachrond. We've got Flicker, Sacrifice, non-creature spells, big damage, Exalted, enchantments and curses, equipment, artifact mana, saboteurs, and smelt value. When it comes to the mechanics, we have smelt, we have disturb, and we have keys, and we have sagas. So rather than read out all the mechanics, what they do here, how about we just get into the cards? We're going to start at common like I always do, and when we get to those mechanics, we'll talk about them there. So we're going to start with white. Having looked through the set a few times, I already have a pretty good memory, and I know not everything has been changed, so hopefully we can get through this early part much faster than previous sets. For example, I don't need to stop on Bewitch Hex Hunters. I know it's completely safe. Right off the bat, here is Smelt on Calcify. It is 2 white, exile an enchanted, exile the enchanted permanent, Smelt only as a sorcery. So Smelt is sacrifice an artifact, and you get to cast an artifact card from outside the game with 1 greater mana value for free. So if you sacrifice an artifact that costs 2 or 3, you get something that costs 3 or 4. Many times in previous submissions, we'd mentioned that we had some concerns over Smelt's potential to do some kind of crazy stuff. I believe Scribbl has landed on a conservative place. The fact that you have to pay a lot up front and a lot on the second half, and then as a sorcery and then Smelt, I think it's officially back to where Scribbl wants it to be as a limited mechanic, and I think looking at the cards so far, at least Calcify, I'm not concerned about it in a constructed sense. I think you'd have to warp significantly more than what it used to be to get the value off of it. So with that said, now that I've talked about Smelt, we're just going to walk on through. We're going to be able to go through quite a few of these cards. I've had the chance to see a lot of them before. As always, just pause the video if you want to get a chance to read some of them, because we won't have time to read every single common. So here we go. Here we go. Cute little Exalted here on Champion of the Paragon. Yep, that's fine. As a curse, here's another Smelt. I think this one's still fine. You pay 1, you get a 1/1, and then you have to go all the way to 4 mana and sacrifice it. And if you sack this artifact token, you only get a 1. So I think this is where I'm happy to have Smelt, and I won't bring up more issues with it. At this 4 mana and greater sorcery, it's clearly for limited more than anything else. Goldhearth Torian. Once you turn an artifact control is put into a graveyard, you may put... So this card could be good. Probably worth keeping an eye on still. Just the fact that when it dies, you gain life equal to its power is pretty nice. I would say being able to crack treasures once on your turn, once on their turn, this thing can start growing. So whenever there's something that has a growth and does not have a cap, I like putting it on my little watch list. So Heirloom Empath. Yep, totally fine. Martyrize. Right here, supposed to go on the turn. Yeah, interesting. This is an interesting piece of removal. Either a decent sized pump for +3/+3 in white, and then destroy it if it has mana value 4 or greater. That's really not bad. Moment of Respite. Yep, exile a non-land. The fact that it's fast flicker is interesting. I wonder if that could be concerning. Something to keep in mind here. Purging Light is a reprint. I believe we already have it in the format, so that's not a problem. Anvil Right, that's a safe Smelt here. Our first card with Disturb, you might recognize it from Canon Magic. Again, a little overhang here. I think you could easily do a crop that puts it there. When it attacks, tap a creature, yep, and then you disturb it into a curse. That's fun. I like Disturb into curses a lot. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, you tap target creature that player controls, and then of course it's got the disturb text if it goes to the graveyard from anywhere. You exile it instead. Obviously, as you can see, there's, we've got doors, we're underground. If you didn't have a chance to see in the set details, this is really the underground dungeon set. So that's the theme that we're going for. Wayward Luminosaurus gives a creature +0 lifelink, and when it dies, bring it back. 2/4 for 4, that's fine. Ancient Schematics, you draw 2, and if mana for an artifact was spent to cast it, you can draw 4, then discard 2. That's neat, I like it. I like it quite a bit. In fact, I'm going to put that as my first I Heart cards over in my little document here that I have on the side for the designers. Asmol Lochmere, 3/2 that makes something can't be blocked and then can't be blocked itself. That's fine. A 6 for a 6/6 enters if you cast it. Smelt, that's a safe if you cast it. Seems fine. And when you attack, you return a non-land permanent you control. It has to be another, so it can't bring itself back. Yep, that seems fine. Forge Coolin gives -3/-0. You can sacrifice it to Smelt as a sorcery. 3 mana here on this one, but this is the kind of card that if you're putting on an opponent's stuff and the opponent gets rid of it, it's kind of hard to get the value off of it. I still think this is the activate sorcery here. I think this is still probably fine. Glacier Diviner. Yep, that's fine. Historical Recovery, Surveil, draw, create a tap treasure. So I had flagged this in the past, but I think we're at the point where this card already kind of exists in Wildershrine Pilgrimage. And density is not an issue, I believe, on this card at this point. It'll see play if it sees play. Sorcery speed, not instant speed, makes a difference. Hypnotic Terran, big flappy tapper, seems fine. Interrogate, alright, here we go, the first key. So it's return a creature Planeswalker's owner's hand and you get a key. It's got equip 1, and when the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you sacrifice it and draw a card. I really like keys, so happy to see that they're still in. Archaeologist, 2 mana 1/1. I think I had flagged this in the past, I might flag it again, just because it draws an island or an artifact with a mana ability for such a low drop. It's the kind of like tutor lines that if anybody finds out something to do with it, could be a problem. Especially because it goes directly to your hand. So, just going to make a note of it. Something to keep an eye on if ever the set gets in. Isle of the Oubliette. Yeah, it makes a key when it enters. That's fine. The Pilfer draws a card, it loots, and then you can disturb. And whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to that enchanted player, you get to loot. So, nice little Pilfers here. Scrap for parts. Counters an artifact or returns an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand at instant speed. Seems totally fine. Syncopate. Cannon card. We know this card is fine. Is it already in the format? I'm going to take just a quick check here. Oh my gosh. Yeah, alright, we already have it in the format. Cool. Would be new art for it. Cadaver Captive. This is a 1/1 that dies. Create 2 keys. Again, just because it's the kind of thing that generates more tokens than, it is. You always got to keep in mind. So just something to keep an eye on. 2 keys could also just mean 2 artifacts, which in certain decks means, if anything has like an affinity it'll cost 2 less. Clawing Grudge. It's a curse. The enchanted player has to sack a creature, and once each turn, you get to Surveil 1 when a creature enchanted player controls dies. But that's good removal at 2 and a black. Dark Fathom Dungeoneers makes a key on enter, and equipped creatures get +1/+0. That's really neat. Endless Maw. 3/5 for 4 is kind of stacky. That seems a little chunky. I'm not sure that you want that at 4 mana when it comes to at least limited. I don't think this, I'm just going to make a quick limited note for here. That's a big thing. Wonder if that wants to be 5-drop. Or, a 3/3 or a 3/4, but 3/5. My gosh. Enraptured Orator. Orator? I actually don't know how to pronounce that. 1 and a black, 2/2. Once each turn when you cast a non-creature spell, you can put a counter on it. If you do, you lose a life. That's fine. Menace 4/2 for 4 here, disturbs into an equipment. So it's cool. So we don't have just the curses. We've also got the equipment disturbs. This one gives +1/+0 and menace for an equip 2. Very neat. Infernal Binding creates a 1/1 elemental artifact and a 1/1 red spirit that when it dies deals a damage. That's a cute little, get a little bit of both. Kakarot Slag Shaper. It's a 4/4 for 5. Enters if you cast it, Smelt. I think that's safe. I think if you're getting to 5 mana to get that, I think we're fine here. It's really was the cheap low drops one that had Smelt, and a lot of them had an alternative mode that also could give you a 1/1 token, so I think this is a lot safer. Morning Banshee, 1/1 flying lifelink that flips into enchanted player, lose a life, gain a life. Totally fine. Profane Penitence, -2/-2, but if its controller is cursed, -7. That's really nice, and if it would die, exile it. I like that as a removal. I don't think it'll see constructed, but this can get rid of a lot of stuff in this limited. This is really cool. Shape from Tar enters. You bring back an artifact or a creature card for 2, and then you can crack it later to smelt. Silk Swath, little decent removal here in limited. Stalking Sensation, 2 mana, enchant it. They reveal their hand and discard a non-land card. Interesting. You don't pick it though, they just discard one. And then when you cast a spell that targets the enchanted player, you can sacrifice it to draw a card. Good, I'm glad it's not more than just draw a card. Candlecleft's Prospector, whenever it attacks, it makes something else with power 2 or less can't be blocked. These are probably good together, right, if you've got 2 or more. And then it flips into Prospected Pick, which is target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn, so a little bit more of the same value, but not an equipment. Consecrating Fire, 2 damage, permanent would be exiled. Nice to see here. Drill Out, destroys an artifact with mana value 3 or less, and then deals 3 damage to its controller. That's totally fine. That's really safe. What's Smash to Smithereens? My gosh, where are we? Here we go. Destroy an artifact, 3 damage to its controller. I guess in this format you want to hedge a little, like, not as strong as Smash to Smithereens, but this is quite a bit under that. Furnace Fledgling, 2/3 flying for 2 and a red seems kind of weird for red limited, I got a feeling. So I'm going to make another note, at least for limited here. And I believe its smelt is, okay, 3, sacrifice its smelt, activate only as a sorcery. Outfitter, whenever sorcery control deals 4 more damage, you get to rummage, and it can get to that 4 by paying 4. It doesn't have a cap on it, so if you've got a lot of mana to throw into, this thing can do a lot of damage. Lava Spike Trap, 1 damage to each opponent, each creature as an enchantment when it enters, and then you can pay 4, sacrifice it, and smelt as a sorcery. Seems fine. Genesis, 5 damage to a creature planeswalker. My one issue is we're seeing a lot of these. I know why, again, because it's for the smelt, but a lot of these, if you can find a way to like flicker some of these enchantments, and I know we saw one, right? We saw Moment of Respite, right? Some of these enchantments have pretty big, ooh, we went way too far, have big effects. I mean, like 5 damage, you know, or a sweep, things to keep in mind. Scoriazor, 6 for a 4/2, deals damage to a creature, planeswalker, number of artifacts. Yeah, that's fine. Vizier, 4/1, when it dies, you get an artifact, an instant, or a sorcery card back from your graveyard to your hand. It's fine. 3/2 haste for 3, makes a key, that's cool. Toil the Mines, you have to sack an artifact, you draw 2, create a treasure. That one could be slightly concerning. It's kind of easy to have a treasure lying around, and then it's just, you know, yeah, okay. Draw 2, create a treasure, but you sack. We've got draw 2, create a tapped treasure, I believe, for 2 and a red, but you discard, so this could be something to keep in mind. It seems easy to get it sacrificed. Unchained Fury, +3/+0, first strike, and you attach a key to it. That's kind of cool. Sorcery speed is nice here. I think instant speed would have made it too good. Wax Ignis, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, deals 1 damage to each opponent. The fact that it's a 1-drop is a little concerning. Usually you kind of see these things starting at 2. So just going to make a little note that maybe Wax Ignis wants to be a 2-drop. And of course it's got Disturb, which is the same thing. Cast a non-creature spell, deals a damage to the enchanted player. So, a little sticky here. Antiquary Arakir, reach 1/2 when it blocks by an artifact creature, flying gets a little bigger. Nice. Neat little blocker there. Bloodthirsty Lacerix on your turn is a 3/1 for 2, that's fine, and then it has Disturb, same thing, it turns into a Bloodthirsty Fang. I'm always a fan of these flips that are like, hey, this is the creature before, and this is what we made out of it. As long as your turn, equip creature gets +2/+0 and equip 2. That seems pretty fine. Covetous Mason, 3 mana, 2/1 Death Touch, when it enters, create a treasure token in green, that's fine. Fernweird Geologist, this is the big one. You pay 7, you smelt, activate only as a sorcery. If you're getting to 7, you deserve to get that. That's fine. And it's a neat little payoff if you're ramping. Gilded Greed, it's the key, and then it's a bite for sorcery. That's fine. Labyrinth Warden, I know this one. Equip creatures get trampled and it makes a key. And it doesn't equip them, so that's fine so far. Mineral Harvest enchants an artifact or a creature and gives it the ability to tap for mana of any color, and it draws, but it's 2 mana, so it's fine. Whenever source you control, Surveil, yep. Land can go back to your hand. Cool. 6 mana, 6/6. Mana from an artifact was spent to cast it, you gain 6 life. Pretty cool. Mana from an artifact is a cool thing. I've thought about using that as well. It's a very nice rider for abilities. Stone Skin, +2/+0, indestructible until end of turn. Not bad. Survivalist Captain, 2/2, and a creature attacks alone, you put a counter on the captain. So if he attacks alone, you get a 3/3. Tectonic Shift just absolutely nukes an artifact creature, a creature with flying, or a planeswalker for 7 damage. It's good and limited. Terraformation gives your land a little bit of ramp, and then it's got a smelt. Still at the level where I think these are fine. We've got, now this is the interesting thing. So you might notice that, a lot of colorless artifacts, and some of them are very situational, and the reason for that is, of course, smelt. So a few of the ones that you don't need will be your smelt pool on the side, same as what you would have in like Lesson and Learn. So Abyssal Shredder, when you enter another artifact, is put into a graveyard. It's put into... Okay. Each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. I'm assuming this isn't from anywhere. I'm assuming this is from the board, right? Because it doesn't say card, so... yeah, okay. Neat. 5/4 for 5. That's actually not bad. Like, I would just play that. So the Armilleries enter with 2 charge counters each, and you can pay 1 tap. I believe it's all 1 in a tap. We'll have to see if the other one... Maybe there's only 3. All 3 of them seem to be 1 in a tap. Remove a counter, so this one is draw. Yeah, that's fine, and it's slow. So what you do is when they're out of charge counters is you smelt this into a 4-drop, right? This one creates 1/1s, and this one puts counters. So you've got your 1, your 2, your 3. So what you can do is go 1s, and then smelt up to this one, which makes some tokens, and then this one, which draws cards. Like, there's something neat here. Armory Attendant, put a counter, nice, on 2 other target creatures. Can't put it on itself, that's fine. Tyrannax, just a big chunky 6/5. When it becomes blocked, it'll deal 4 damage to a defending player or planeswalker. So it's like, well, that's fine. Good and limited, seems very fine. Chronite Tunneler, you bring back a creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand, 3/1 for 4. Wyvern is a 3/2 flying for 4. Collapsing Ceiling, I'm guessing, is going to deal damage. Yep, equal to 1 plus the number of artifacts you control. For 1 is nice. This is actually kind of nice in this format and limited. 3 for a 2/2 that can gain double strike. At instant speed's kind of sneaky here at common. It's like instant speed, activate, gain first strike, and yeah, a lot of things it can do. Dredge Scuttler, 2 for 2, and when it dies, you put a counter. It's these little dies ones are really neat because they play well. I mean, with smelt. Earth Warder, when it enters, you can search your library for a card named Earth Warder or Hall of the Titans, which we'll see later, and you put into your hand. So nice little card to kind of loop around. Foreboding Prism is like, yeah, okay, it's like a prismatic prism, but you pay a life to add mana rather than filter, and it enters, you draw a card. That's neat. Furnace Stoker, blocks or becomes blocked, deals a damage to that creature. Neat. Gilded Servitor, when dies, both players make a treasure. It's a 2 for a 2/2, that's fine. Vigilance Menace, 5 for a 4/3. Neat on the Glacial Revenant. I like all these artifacts that are like situationally almost there. I like it a lot. Ichor Wellspring, cannon card, nice to see here. Igneous Harbinger, it's a 2/2 for 5, but when it dies, you get your 4/4. So this is your big smelt, go 5 to 6. Like, go get out your Tyrannax. The one thing, obviously, is you're probably playing Tyrannax from your library anyway, because it's not horrible. Iron Sentry is a 1/1 disturb 1 that turns into like a short sword with Iron Gauntlet. Pretty neat. Jade Carapace makes a 3/2, and then you attach the Carapace, and then 4/3 that can't block. So you can always crack this Carapace to leave your 3/2, so that's neat. Luminous Latch, it's nice to see some keys that aren't just tokens, so +1/+0 can't be blocked. And when it deals combat damage, you sack it to draw a card. This is actually quite neat, and I can see this being quite strong when you really want to punch in like some serious damage. You get an extra point of damage, and you draw a card. And for 1/1, this seems really good. Onyx Reaver, 2/3 Surveil, 1 for 3, disturbs into a Keening Onyx, which surveils. Very neat. Petrified Light, you gain 3 life, Surveil 3, 3/3 for 5, that's fine. Pilgrim's Eye is a nice reprint. Refractor Geode, seems pretty playable here. I mean, any permanent you control, add 1 mana of any type, yeah. Requisition Rope, +1/+1, can't be blocked by creatures with flying or reach. More evasion, I mean, this plays really well with keys, right? You want those keys to go through. Rhyme Thread Recluse, 4/1/5, that's fine. Salvage Hulk, yep, seems really good. You just clock in. You can block with it too, like that does a lot, you know, becomes indestructible and you tap it. Slag Colossus, here's another 6, and it costs 1 less for each artifact card in your graveyard as a 4/4. I think that's probably fine. If you're playing a deck where you're getting a lot of artifacts in the yard, maybe this puts an affinity, you know, hat on for a turn, but I think that's probably fine. Tarnished Grail, gain 3 life, mill 3 card when it enters. That's actually, I don't want to say concerning, but that's a lot of value for a 1-drop. And of course it has a 2-tap sack draw card. The 3 life is probably the one that's the most interesting. It means any deck can just gain 3 life, and if you're a graveyard deck, that can do a lot. Titan Seal Hellion, yeah, okay, this is the kind of stuff that you want to chain up to. 7/6 that can't be blocked by small stuff for 7. Castigator's a +2 with the sword. It gives menace if you're attacking alone. That's a neat little, I attack alone and therefore you must block me with friends. Cool. Volatile Cinder, when it dies, 2 damage to any target, 1/1 for 2. Is that just Perilous Mirror? It's been a long time since I've looked at Perilous Mirror. I also can't type Perilous today. Yep, okay, it's Perilous Mirror. I like that it's an artifact elemental. You might notice a lot of this art is from Hearthstone or World of Warcraft trading card game, and that's just because they have a lot of cards that, you know, have underground and dungeons, so it just fits really well. Voltaic Familiar, 1/2 for 2, flies, attacks, untap an artifact. This is actually kind of neat. I would love to play limited and get some of these. We have quite a few lands, which is really cool too, because they're all like, they all tap for colorless, but they can do a lot. So I'd have to ask Scribble if the packs are seeded any certain way to make sure that there's not like infinite lands. Abandoned Railroad gives something +2/+0 until end of turn. That's probably fine. Is that Teetering Peaks? Enters tap +2/+0. This one is untapped, but it's not colored. There we go. Branching Catacombs adds colorless on the turn that it's here, and then you can sacrifice it for a basic land card put onto the battlefield tapped. Okay, I think I had mentioned before. Did I mention this card before? I got a feeling that I had made a note of it just because any deck that wants like a double land drop and can use that mana, I mean, this is a significantly better Evolving Wilds, right? In the sense that you do get mana on the turn that this enters. Interesting. Diamond Quarry can sack for a mana of any color, but then when it put into the graveyard, you get a tapped Wastes basic land token. Again, you know, I think it's still fine, but it's quite good. Thankfully, there's not too many things that make these untapped, or there's a lot of interesting things you could do. Dungeon Hall, I remember it, really cool. Creates a key token. Fungal Hollow enters, you surveil 1, that's fine. Armory is fine, you put a counter. I mean, it's good. It's just slow, right? Perilous Overpass is you sack it, you bring back a permanent you control to its owner's hand, but only as a sorcery, so you can't use it to rescue things. I like that. Radiant Fountain is neat. River of Fugue, you exile 2 target cards from graveyards. That's fine, and we've got stuff like this in the format. And Titanholm Crucible, you sacrifice it to get a 4/4 that can't block that turn. It is instant speed, though, so you can hold mana and then crack it when you really need to. I think that's still reasonable. 6-tap sack, a 4/4 that can't block that turn. Might be a little bit on the high end, but it seems fine. Was there anything? No, nothing that's special, so we're moving up to uncommon. I'm going to keep moving here. Antiquate is fine. Beckoner of the Damned, Flying Disturb 1 is fine. And whenever it or another curse becomes attached, you get a 1/1 spirit. That's pretty good, actually. I think that could see play. Probably not. It's just, it's nice with copies of itself, right? Because it's or another curse becomes attached, right? So if you get your second one, then you'll get 2 1/1 spirits with flying, if I'm reading this correctly. So Snubhorn, just big body, makes things bigger for a turn. When Dungeon Architect enters, you either flicker a non-land permanent or exile one you don't control until it leaves. That's good flexibility, and a 2/4 for 4 is really not bad, honestly. Dungeon Fatigue, draw a card, and then their creatures can't attack unless they pay 1 for each of those. That's really interesting to see uncommon at 3 mana, especially with the draw card and curse relevance. Invoker of Angel Fire. When you cast an artifact spell, gain a life. It wasn't cast from your hand, it grows, and then it's got Smelt, but like for 7, so probably fine. Molten Masterwork enters, brings an artifact card from your graveyard back to the battlefield, then has Smelt. I think this one is still fine. It's still very expensive. Order of Redemption. Attacks alone. Sorry about that pause there. A bit of coughing. You return a creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to your hand. That can get a lot of stuff back, and then flying and lifelink. I could see this being pretty good in this limited. Seraph, 4 damage to a target tapped creature, gain 4 life. So yeah, it's fine. Beguiling Greed, you get a treasure on enter. When an artifact enters, you can tap a creature an opponent controls and stun it, but only once each turn. That's neat. Consigned to History is nice. It's a quench, and then if the spell was not cast from a player's hand, you exile it and draw a card instead of countering it for 2. I could see Consigned being sideboarded for some things. I mean, the base rate of quench is not the worst. And we have a lot of stuff in the format that's not cast from hand, so. Excavation Embezzler. It can't be blocked if you control no treasure tokens, but when it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. You can always just use it right away, but I like that you have to use all of them before it can be unblocked again. This is a cool card, I like it. Fettered Figment is a 2/2 for blue that creates a key, but if it attacked this combat, you have to sacrifice it unless you've already sacrificed a permanent this turn. Now, something to keep in mind is we have fetch lands in the format. So is blue for a 2/2 that has a key that you can put to draw, and then if you crack the land, you don't have to worry about it, a problem? Maybe not. Is it worth putting on my watch list? Probably. You never know. Gold Shackled Worm. Each mana from artifact spent counts for an additional. So, you know, if you've got mana rocks and stuff, you can cast this for a lot cheaper as a 4/5 flyer. That's a big toughness to deal with in uncommon and limited. Blue is exile a creature. It comes back and attaches a key to it, and it's next end step, so we're fine here. Engineering. If you cast it, you create a token that's a copy of an artifact you control for 3. That's not bad. And then it has a smelt. Neat. Salvage Technician creates 2/0/2 Thopter artifacts with flying. Nice. Once each turn, when an artifact is put into a graveyard, you can put a counter on it. That's pretty good. That gums up the board pretty fast. As soon as you get one of them, it's a 1/3. Like, that is a lot for a 4-drop. Trove Mage just gets an artifact card with mana value 4. Neat, and it's a 2/2 for 3. Tormentor, 3/2, they lose 3 life. Yeah, okay, so it torments. It's a mechanic we have in the format. And then Disturb, when it or another curse becomes attached to it, they lose 3 life unless they... That's a really cheap Disturb. I'm not even too concerned about the front half, but maybe if this gets into the graveyard, like you're just milling, that's a pretty fine back half to have just for free, you know? Black, you lose 3 life, or you discard a card or sack a non-land permanent, and then you do it again, and then they have to do it twice, right? So... Just for the Disturb being 1 mana, maybe 2 mana would be a little safer. We'll see. Binding Grudge. Draw a card, lose a life for 2 for a curse, and once each turn when you lose life, the other one also loses life. Neat. The Jailer is a 1/2 where you can sack creatures or non-key artifacts to create keys. Love the art here. Very cool. I'm going to put that on my love list. I like little designs like this. Consecrated Lich. 2/2 for 3, enters, you get a 1/1 cleric with lifelink, and when you cast a non-creature spell, you can sacrifice another creature. If you do, the Lich becomes a 4/4 white angel with flying until end of turn. Wow, that's a beater right there. And it kind of provides for itself? Jeez, alright. Deathless Justiciar? Who knows? 1 to black, someone will correct me, I'm sure, in the comments. 2/1, whenever it attacks while it's equipped, it gains lifelink until end of combat. Neat little text. And you can pay 4 life. Tap it, it gains indestructible. Cool. Extract Impurity gives non-artifact -2/-2. See, that's on an enchant. If you cast. Thank you, Scribble. You already called it. If you cast it. 2 black smelt is fine. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you can pay a life. If you do, draw a card. Neat. Destroy a non-artifact. Go for the throat. I'm fine with having in the format. It's not a. I would be very fine with getting a bit more removal. 6 for a 4/4 menace, you can exile a creature card. Nope, just any card to give something -X/-X. Neat, this seems really good. Gain control of a small thing, but you create a key token attached to it. Cool. If you fail to hit, you know, the opponent gets the key, so that's fine payoff. Extract from Amber, bring back any number of artifact cards with different mana value, X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Can red reanimate artifacts? I'm going to make a note of that. I don't know. I don't have off the top of my head a mono red bring back an artifact. Number of target artifact cards with different mana. Thank you for different mana values, because we have a few artifact lands, but something to keep in mind. This could be interesting. Invoker of Hellfire. Cast an artifact, deals 1 damage, and then if it wasn't from your hand, put a counter. Very expensive smelt. We're fine. Purifying Pyre exiles 2 cards from graveyards and then deals 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker. You have to have the targets. Okay. Probably fine. The fact that you can't do it if your opponent doesn't have, or I mean, you or your opponent doesn't have cards in the yard, but this is some really good 1 mana removal. Raptor Roost puts carrion counters whenever it enters or a source deals 4 more damage, and then eventually you can sacrifice it to create a bunch of dinosaurs. Very cool. Rockslide Rampage. Artifact creatures control enter with an additional counter on them. I actually kind of like text like this. And you can pay 4 sack smelt, and if it was a creature, it enters with an additional counter. I'm cool with this one. This is fine. Ruinous Rumblings. It deals damage to any target equal to the amount of colorless you spent to cast spells this turn. Neat. Like, 4 is expensive, but like if you're playing a lot of tap for colorless stuff, this can do a lot of damage. Engineer makes your first non-creature cost 1 less to cast. Pretty cool with quite a few 1-drop artifacts. And then if a source you control would deal non-combat damage, deals that much damage plus 1. Cool little mirror ability here. Slagma, sacks and artifacts, destroys an artifact, 5/5 menace for 5 is really good for this limited. Cadaver Cleansers. If a creature you control died, you put a counter on it, but it's a 2, so that's probably fine. And then Disturb, I believe it's the same text. It's a Festering Censor. Yeah. Equip sack a creature. Interesting. So that triggers the Censor's ability. Frenzy gives +4/+4, and then until end of turn, whenever a source you control deals 4 more damage, you draw a card. Very cool. Dungeoneering, I love this art. I've used it in Enter the Dungeon as well. It's so pretty. William O'Connor makes great art. For each creature you control, put a counter and create a key token attached to it. Kind of weird for green to like draw so much on the wide, but like it's done it before. It's done like draw cards equal to like damage dealt and stuff, so probably fine. Mesozoology, you mill 5 cards, you return a creature or land milled this way to your hand, and if it was a creature card with lesser mana value than a creature you control, you can instead cast it without paying its mana cost. This seems pretty good. Like, you have a 3-drop or a 2-drop, you get to cast 1-drops and 2-drops for free. I don't think it's a problem. I think it would be an interesting card to build around, so I'm happy to just keep a note of it, but not too concerned. Destroy an artifact or enchantment, so better naturalize, but if mana from an artifact was spent to cast it, you get a 3/2 colorless elemental, and it can't block this turn. So you still need to have targets for it, so you're not like main decking this so much. So very, very cool. Probably super strong in this format, honestly. Like Stalactite Miner, 1/1 for 2. You make a 0/2 Thopter with flying. I will say, I think it's a little weird that green is making the 0/2s with flying. Like, yeah, it doesn't deal damage, but it blocks like reach. But if you put counters on it, it does. So that's kind of an odd little color thing to check. So just gonna make another note of that. For color identity. And then artifacts you control have tap an untapped creature to tap for colorless, so which is relevant in this format. Quartermaster, creature you tax alone, you either put a counter or you attach an equipment. Cute, I like it. Tectonic Takedown, an artifact creature bites, and then it's got Smelt. Yep. Skulker creates a key, and then when an equipped creature you control attacks, gains Death Touch. That's really good with keys. Alright, we've got the Legends, I believe, now, right? Yeah, the multicolor Legends. Anachrond, Fire of Deliverance, Demon Minotaurs. That's fine. Once each turn. See, I'm happy to see these once each turns. Having these little limits means cards are cute, they can work in the limited, and they don't have to be backbreaking. When you cast enchantment spells, you draw a card, lose a life. Yeah, so it's an enchantress, but it will maybe kill you. But flying and lifelink, if ever you manage to curse your opponent. That seems pretty fine. Truelight Martyr here with Bryn. 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever a creature attacks alone, you get a scout, and you can tap those creatures to give +1/+1. So the more you attack alone with Bryn, the more you have little scouts that can make her stronger. Drill Sergeant Belgrum. You get a 1/1 elemental artifact. Cool. 2/2 for 3. And when a permanent is put into your graveyard, if it was an artifact, each opponent loses a life. If it was a creature, surveil 1. So obviously you do both if it was an artifact creature. Cool. Thankfully it's not, lands. Firekeeper Harem, 4/4 for 4. Whenever you deal 4 more damage, you put an Awakening counter on a land, and it becomes a 4/4 with haste. I can see that getting out of hand, but not in constructed, but in limited, Thankfully it's another non-land source, so the lands won't trigger it, but, 4/4 creatures is quite good. Kazan, Crystal Physician, 2/3 for 3. When it enters or attacks, you can bring back a non-land permanent to its owner's. You control to its owner's hand. If you do, you gain 2 life. The fact that it can bring itself back could be an issue. I mean, what's the word? Like, it triggers and enter the battlefield, you gain 2 life. Like, that's probably not what you're doing with it. Spell Region of Rot, a 3/3 for 3 with equipments you control have. When it dies, if it was not a token, you get a 1/1 green fungus creature and attach this equipment to it. That's quite good. And turns into Putrefear the Cankerer, which is +1/+1, and has the ability, when it dies, if it wasn't a token, you get a fungus creature token and attach the equipment to it. Neat. Preservationist Hamley, when you activate a mana ability of an artifact you control without paying its non-mana costs. Let me read that again. Activate a mana ability of an artifact you control without paying its non-mana costs. Okay. very specific. So that's like if it had like, you know, tap, sacrifice. Interesting. So you wouldn't have to pay the tap, right? Would have to keep that in mind. 2 green, blue, tap, return a card from your graveyard to your hand, and then you have to put Hamley on the bottom of its owner's library. I'd have to check a few of these to see what it works with right now, but Sherrick's the Unraveler. You just, at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a key, but then you sack it at the beginning of the end step. I really like this card, like a lot. Therum, Dumar, Coresmith is a Vigilance 3/3. Once each turn, when you cast an artifact spell, you can bring back an artifact card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to your hand. That seems pretty good. Constructed-wise, having to wait to get a 3/3 for 3 to start doing stuff is probably a little much, but it's a once each turn. Very safe. Okay, that's totally safe. All right, we've got an Armillary, kind of like the ones we saw at Common. Enters with 2 charge counters. This one is 1 tap, remove, 2 damage any target. You gain 2 life only as a sorcery. It costs 4. So it's really good, though. It's, you know, 2 damage, 2 damage. There's probably some things you can deal with. Burning Chain Emissary is a 3/2 for 3. It refunds itself. It was the first spell you cast this turn, so you can't perfectly loop them. Seems interesting. I'm sure someone could figure something out with this. Castigator Warden is a 6 for a 3/4. You can exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent when it enters, and they get a key. Okay, so Meteor Golem, but they get a key. You can't hit lands. Exile instead of destroy, right? I should know this card by heart. I play it in my Brago Commander. No, this one is still a non-land. 7 for a 3/3. This is 6 for a 3/4. And it's destroy and exile. I think I would like this more if it wasn't a 4 toughness, like just 3/3. But okay, it does refund them a key, I guess. Cranial Clasp is a key, and it enters, you exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, and when the equipped creature deals combat damage, you can sack it to exile that player's graveyard and draw a card. So I like how it's both a key and graveyard exile. Crystal Ravager is a 5/5 for 5, which is, you know, totally fine. And then you can keep paying 1 to make 1/1s. And if you have a thing that says when you create an artifact token, put a counter, or, you know, you can kind of just do a lot of gross things with it. Probably still fine, but, you know, kind of thing to keep an eye on. The fact that it costs 5, you know, balances it out in Constructed. Drill Rig has a little mana ability, then you can crew it for a 5/5. Always a big fan of like Cultivator Caravan type vehicles where you can use them as a mana rock before you, you know, hop into them. How many more cards? Okay, we got quite a few more here on this color list. Let's keep stepping it up. Nautilus dies. You search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. Neat. Foundry Progenitor. It's a 1/3 for 2, so like it doesn't die to everything, but you know. Foundry Progenitor, 6 for a 6/6. It has to attack each combat, and if it hasn't dealt damage yet, it has trample, hexproof, and damage from it can't be prevented. Seems like a really good top end, honestly. It feels almost like you would want this at rare, but no, it's a just powerful and common to have in this limited, I'm sure. So there's Hall of the Titans, which I believe was the card that you could pull from one of the commons. And this one is tap until end of turn. Each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature with the same name as it. Okay, that makes sense. If you pull Hall of the Titans, you're going to want to grab as many copies of those commons that tutor each other. Heritage Morningstar. This is actually kind of cool. Equip creature that attacked this turn is kind of cool line of text, and +2/+1 is not outrageous, so equip 3. I like it. I think it's fine. Labyrinth Shortcutter. 4/4 for 4 vehicle. We have to tap other untapped creatures to get it +1/+1. It's got a crew 1. That seems fine. Lumbering Mauler. 3 for a 4/2. When it attacks, it doesn't untap, but, you know, 3 for a 4/2. Disturb gives a +4/+0 equipment, and again, doesn't untap during its controller's untap step with equip 4. Morphic Mass, it's just, it enters as any artifact or creature you control, but it's a 7/7 artifact creature in addition to its other types. Again, this is the kind of stuff you'd imagine like would be at rare in most sets, but like, dang, that's a really big top end. Moral Compass, I was wondering if we're going to have a tap target player mills a card. There's a few cards in the set that we've seen that really benefits from that. Then you can sacrifice it to shuffle any number of other cards from your graveyard into your library, then draw a card. And it's a 1-drop. That's pretty good. Moral Compass might want to have just a little eye on. Any card that's a 1-mana tap mill has potential in this format because of cards like Stolen Secrets, but the other activate ability is pretty good. 2/1 for 2. It's an Orca. This is so funny. And you can pay 4 to bring it back from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So kind of like a big reassembling, you know, skeleton, but it's an Orca. Refractling is a 1/1 for 1 that when it dies, you either get a 1/1, and it's a colorless elemental artifact, or you can create a token that's a copy of an artifact token you control. Pretty neat. We have Solemn Simulacrum downshifted to uncommon. Steel Exemplar, which is also a reprint at uncommon. Stonebinder, 2 for a 1/1 that can slowly grow itself, or when you disturb, it makes an equipment that does the same thing. Is Grinding Stone? It's Grindstone, right? There's no grinding. Cool. All right. Titanholm Anvil, 4 taps for 2 colorless, seems fine here, and then 7 taps Melt. Activate only as a sorcery. Marauder, each player has to sack an artifact and it's a 3 for a 3/3. This is the kind of stuff that's cool in the format. Like, you wouldn't expect sack an artifact to do much, but in this format, there's a lot of artifacts lying around. Alright, Access Tunnel, we know from canon. Buried Rune, we know from canon. I'm totally fine with both of those. Same as Roadside Reliquary here, skipping ahead. Cathedral of Zealotry, that's fine. Creatures attacking alone gets +1/+1. We have, like, Cathedral of War that already exists, so, you know, Cathedral of Zealotry. Forge of Life, tap for colorless. This one has a sack to smelt. It's on a land, but it's super expensive. Throne of Gildrang. This one's a little concerning. Any land that can just, like, keep pumping out treasures, I always want to flag. You do need the colorless for it, but again, probably totally safe. I just like having an eye on cards like that. Alrighty, moving up to rare, and yes, the set does have mythics, I remember. It's got quite a few good ones. Executor Algaz is a 3/1 for 2 that dies into a 1/1 spirit, and then you can pay white to disturb to get Crucifix, which is a +1/+0 equipment. And when it deals combat damage, you sack it and you transform. You sack the equipped creature that dealt combat, and then you get Executor Algaz back. The equip used to be 2, it's 3. I think this makes it a little more balanced. I think I would have preferred the extra cost being on the disturb rather than on the equip, but I think that's totally fine. I think we're at a better place here. I'm not going to write it down. I think the loops are expensive enough. Tether, exile all non-land permanents you own, then return them, or exile each opponent's graveyard. So you can do one or both. Neat. Shepherd of Atonement, 2/1 flyer. If a spell ability of a non-key source of player controls would cause them to draw a card, they create its key token instead. I love this card. It's probably playable. It's an angel, it's a soldier, and it's a cleric, and if the players want to draw anything off of spells or abilities, they're just going to get a bunch of keys. I can see it backfiring if your opponent can, like, pay off from, like, having 5 key tokens on the field, but if not, that's really expensive to get the draws in. Soul Embargo, you exile a non-land with mana value 2 or less, and then spells that player cast that would cost less than 2 mana to cast cost 1 more to cast. Oof. Okay, so 0s cost 1, 1s cost 2. Jeez, that's a pretty nasty curse. And it has an exile mode on it. Neat. Turret Welder, I love this art. It's from the Ascension deck building game. I really like it, so it's nice to see some of the cards here. 3 for a 2/2. Beginning of combat, you put a counter on an artifact, creature, or a vehicle, and whenever a non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard, you get an artifact creature token. That seems really, really good. Probably not at constructed, but who knows? It's a 3 mana. Unfettered Magister is a 4/4 that can't be countered flying. Alright. And then disturb 1 and a white. When an enchanted player casts a spell during your turn, exile Magister's Grudge and counter that spell. That's a pretty good disturb, not gonna lie. Covetous Curator, 3/4 flyer for 5. When it enters, you gain control of a non-land permanent with mana value X or less, where X was the amount of mana from artifacts that was spent to cast it. Very cool. Engineered Extraction creates a bunch of colorless, yeah, I remember this one. Lots of colorless stop to artifact creature tokens, and then you get to counter up to 1 target spell unless they pay 1 for each artifact you control. So if you've already got a ton of artifacts, you can just blue, but if you really need the air support, you've got the option. Forge the Future, look at the top card of your library at any time, you can play colorless cards, so artifacts lands, right? So it's a future sight for 1 less, but limited. History Unburied, search your library for an artifact, creature card, an equipment card, a vehicle card, and an artifact card that's none of those, and reveal them. The opponent will pick 2. The chosen ones go to your graveyard, the rest go into your hand. I don't know who's going to do it. Someone is going to build a combo deck that somehow finds the perfect neat. Just the fact that it tutors a bunch of stuff, I'm just going to make a quick note of it. Hey, let's keep this in mind. Again, if it's totally fine, it's totally fine. It's just, you want to keep an eye out for it. Inescapable Sentence is 1 and a blue. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you create a key token and attach it to that creature. Pretty cool. It could get out of hand with the amount of key tokens, so let's keep in mind that this does not have a cap. It's not 1 or more. You know, it's just straight up, every time you hit, you're going to get a key so that the next hit is does a bunch of stuff. Loretto, 4 mana, 2/5. You create a treasure when he enters, and you can sack an artifact to cast artifact spells from your graveyard this turn. But if you cast spells this way, artifacts enter with a finality counter on it, so you can't loop it. Still seems pretty good. So Decarburize is destroy a creature or planeswalker if its mana value is 2 or less, or if mana from an artifact was spent to cast a spell. I'm sure this card would see play. I'm actually happy, though, to have, having printed one myself until midnight, I'm happy to finally see some mana value 2 or less destroy creatures. I feel like that's quite relevant in keeping some of the format's threats a little more reasonable. Encroaching Darkness, black, beginning of each player's end step, they have to sack a permanent unless they discard a card or exile 2 cards from their graveyard. It is their end step, not their upkeep, so that does make a difference. I don't like that necessarily you can hit lands, but I guess you want to give them that option. Because, of course, once they've sacked a few things or discarded, they can then exile it. I think it's fine. I think it's good, but I think it's reasonable enough. Fatal Footing is a flash. They have to sack a creature. That's actually really good. And you can cast curse spells that target them as though they have flash. That's pretty good by itself. Hollow Flame Scourge, I'm guessing, is going to be one of those recursion creatures. It's a 2/1 that enters tap. You may pay the equip cost of an equipment you control. If you do, return Hollow Flame Scourge from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it and attach that equipment to it. I think that needs to be a capital E. This is a cool card. I actually think it's great. The fact that it comes back with a finality makes me like it so much more. Even with an equipment that's equip 0, like you're getting it back, but it's not going to be as big or as dangerous, right? So very cool stuff. Phylactery Lich is cool to see. That's a canon one, right? I don't think I've seen that card in a while, but yeah, there it is from Okay, I know it from 2011. Cool. Nice to see you back. Maze Stalker is a 3/1 that creates a key when it enters, and once each turn when you sack a non-land permanent, it torments the opponent. They have to sack unless they pay 3 life or discard. Cool. Aegis Augureling, 4 mana, 3/1 flying haste, non-creature spells cost 1 less, and it's got Disturb. Non-creature spells cost 1 less, and when you cast your third non-creature spell not named Augurai Amber each turn, it transforms. I think that's probably still safe as a 4-drop. It's kind of cool. I like it. Amplifying Aegisaur is a 1/1 for red. Whenever a source you control deals damage, you put a counter on it if its power is less than the amount of damage dealt. So you drop this turn 1, and if turn 2 you could go Bolt, and this thing is now a 3/3. You swing for 3. That still seems kind of reasonable. It's good, but it's not like insane. And it has to be less. So then afterwards, it's not going to work. It's, yeah, because a 3 is not less. It would be the same amount. Anvil Rot Epiphany. Whenever an artifact enters, you get to draw. At the beginning of your end step, you can discard your hand, then create a 1/1 colorless elemental artifact creature token, which again would then draw you a card. Neat. Okay, I like it. There's probably a combo deck where this is one of the cards you want to land. I know it would be great in MSEDH, right? You just make a bunch of treasures and draw a bunch of cards. Then you cast them using the treasures, right? So, Catacomb Crasher, 2 in a red, 4/3. When it or another creature enters under your control, you get a key that's attached to it. Seems a little odd in red, I will say. A 4/3 for 3 that when it deals damage, draw a card. Yeah, we'll see. But, oh, okay, there it is. If you would draw instead, you exile the top card. This will teach me to not read the entire card before making an opinion. I forgot that this was the one that turned your draws into impulse. We're fine here. Industry is another part of a sort of like mega cycle that we have going on about triple pipped enchantments. So when you cast your third spell each turn, you get 3 elemental artifact tokens, but when you cast red spells, you add red. That could be kind of gross with stuff. Just because it's uncapped, better keep an eye on Industry. Resounding Regisaur, 2/2 for 2. When you and/or Resounding Regisaur becomes the target of a spell that isn't a copy, you can copy it. Pretty cool. Very, very neat. Very, very good if someone's going to throw a lightning bolt there or something, you know. Alloy Bloom, you search for an artifact card with a mana ability, put into your hand for 4 when it enters, and when you tap an artifact for mana, you add an additional mana of that type, but it has to tap for mana. That's nice. Avaricious Widow is a 2/2/2. I always say that too fast. It's a 2/2 for 1 and a green, so for 2. Reach, activated abilities of artifacts cost 1 more. I like it. It's got Disturb, 2 and a green. It turns into a curse, which is activated abilities of artifacts they control. But it's just theirs, not all of them. Cool. Fertilize, you have to sack a creature. It's green, it's an instant, but you create X 1/1 green fungus creature tokens where X was the greatest toughness among creatures that died under your control this turn. This could be a problem because it is a you may. So like they kill your 3/3, you pay 1, you get 3 1/1s. That might be a little strong. We'll have to keep in mind. We have a lot of cards that like scale, so you know, 5/5s that die, you try to get, you know, 5 1/1s. Memory Spiral, 2 and a green. Beginning of your end step, you can return a card with mana value equal to the number of Helix counters on Memory Spiral from graveyard to your hand. If you do, put a Helix counter on it. Otherwise, Oh yeah, otherwise you put a Helix counter. Why don't you just say put a Helix counter? Oh, but it's a May. It's a May. Okay, that's why. Green sack, you gain life for each Helix counter on Memory Spiral, and it's because you have to return a card with mana value equal to the number of Helix counters. Okay, we're fine. Because if it was not a May, you could accidentally lock yourself out on the otherwise. Okay, we're fine. Plated Ankeg, 4/4 for 3, 1 green. If a source would deal less than 4 damage to Plated Ankeg, you prevent it. It's a really strong card. And if a source you control would deal 4 or more damage to 1 or more permanents, up to 4 excess damage is dealt to that person's control side. I think this card is really neat. I would love to see decks coming back running just big green mid-range things. Thankfully, it's just damage, so you can still, destroy it with any removal spell. Telkalo Mage Hunter is a 3/2 for 2, 1 green. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you attach a key to the Mage Hunter. I like it a lot. Anoint with Destiny. Green-white XX. If an opponent has more life than you, you gain 4 times X life. If they control more creatures than you, X 4/4 white angel creature tokens. And if they've got more cards in hand than you, return X cards from your graveyard to your hand, and you exile Anoint with Destiny. It's probably fine. It's probably fine. You're paying 4 X is 1, so you would gain 4 life and make a 4/4 and draw. Like, it can do a lot, but you do have to be behind on everything. So, Archaeological Adaptation. You search your library for up to 1 land card and up to 1 artifact card with a mana ability. Reveal them, put in your hand. That's a 2 mana. I'm not sure Sylvan Scrying needs. I know it's not exactly Archaeological. Jeez, writing down that word is not easy. Archaeological Adaptation. It's like Sylvan Scrying, but then you also get to pick up an artifact card with a mana ability. So, seems really, really good. I'm not sure it's safe at 2 mana, so let's just keep a note on it. Awash in Worldfire. Until end of turn, whenever a non-token permanent is put into a player's graveyard, they create a tapped treasure token. Whatever non-token... Okay. And destroy all artifacts and enchantments, deals 4 damage. Jeez, okay. At least it's that player. Okay. Correctional Quarantine. 1 white blue. When it enters, you exile a creature or planeswalker until it leaves, but you get to cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. Yeah, could be good. Deliver from Evil. Exile a non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less. If its controller is cursed, you instead sack a curse and gain control of that permanent. That seems really cool. And it's non-land, I like it. Illicit Antiquities. You search an opponent's library for exactly 4 cards with different names and exile them. They shuffle, then choose 2 cards exiled this way. For as long as they remain exiled, you can play them and spend mana of anything. Yep. Pretty cool. Isolated Extinction. 1 black-green. Exile a permanent other than a basic land, and all other permanents with the same name. Sure, for each permanent exiled this way, they get to get a basic land. Cool. Reconstruct History is a reprint. Tolbrad the Seeker. 2/4. For 2 blue-red, you get a key when he enters, and if a creature you control dealing combat damage causes a triggered ability. Sweet, so you could draw 2 off your keys. Nice. Tribute to the Forged Titan, black-red. You look at target player's hand, choose a non-land from it, and exile it, and you may cast a copy of it this turn in mana of any type. That could be a little concerning. That seems like a really solid hand attack that if you're in a sort of like black-red mirror burn stuff, you just, rip it a removal and you get to cast it. At least it's cast a copy this turn, right? So you can't just like hold it for later. But I mean, the fail case isn't bad. Here's another Armillary. This one costs 5 and 1 tap remove. You get to add white, blue, black, red, green, which is kind of nuts, but so goes mana artifacts, I guess. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. This is Assembly Warden. He costs 3 for a 2/3. Gives other artifacts +1/+1, and you can sack it to make your artifacts hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's probably pretty good. Yeah, we're down into the artifacts and lands here. Still got quite a few cards. Chronolith Hulk, 7 for a 6/6. When it dies, search your library for up to 6 artifact cards with mana value 1 or less. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. If you reanimate this and then sack, and it gets a bunch of small stuff, I'm sure there's something nuts you can do with that. Chronothark is still here. I remember not being a big fan of this card. It's a 0-cost legendary Thopter. It's a 0/3 flyer. So we've already got people playing the Mem Knights of the format, and I'm not sure I want to give them a 0/3 flyer for 0, but We'll see. Maybe other council members think it's fine, and I'm just nuts, and this card is totally balanced. I don't know. We'll see. Electric Effigy. It's an artifact for 2. You taps for colorless, and you can 2-tap, untap it. It becomes an elemental, a 2/2. And if no colored mana was spent, you put 2 counters on it, activate only 1. So yeah, it can get pretty big. And it's at base, it's an untapped mana rock. I kind of almost wish it would have entered tapped for what it does. Emberling is a 1 for a 1/1. When it dies, if you control 4 or more lands, it comes back as a 3/2 elemental with when it dies, if you control 7 or more lands, you get a 4/4. And then again, when it dies, if you control 10 or more lands, create a 6/5. So I like the if you control X or more lands. That's a good balancing point. But it is just a 1/1 for 1, so it starts off very cheap. Extraplanar Inhibitor, it's 2 mana for legendary. If 1 or more counters would be put on another permanent, it phases out instead. That's kind of cool. I don't know where you use it, but yeah, it's kind of cool. Glittering Goliath is X, enters with X +1/+1 counters. If damage would be dealt to it, well, it has a counter to prevent that damage. Remove that many instead, and when 1 or more counters are removed from it this way, create that many treasure tokens. That could be kind of risky. That could be kind of risky, especially if you have ways of, paying to put more counters on it. There's a whole thing there. Hoots, Seeker's Guide is a 1/1 flyer for 1. It's an artifact bird legendary. +1/+1 for each history counter you have, and when Hoots deals combat damage to a player, you shuffle Hoots into her owner's library, draw a card, get a history counter. I like it. Kind of cute. I mean, just a 1/1 flyer for 1 that when it hits, draw a card, but then it goes away. Yeah, that's fine. Imposing Kiln Kite is a 6/5/6 flyer. It's an artifact dragon. Ward, they have to sack a non-land non-token. And when it attacks, you can sack a non-land non-token. And if they do, they have to sack a non-land non-token permanent. Okay, a lot of sack going on. Keening Bell Tower, whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Neat. Tap, each player draws a card, 2 and tap, draw a card. Do we have this already? I think so. Oh, it's from, I think this was in Revolution. But, yeah, pretty sick card. Marbled Fusion, it's a 1/1 lifelink death touch for 2 with Disturbed 1, which creates an Essence Marble, which gives a creature lifelink and death touch if you equip it for 2. Yeah, alright, pretty good. Caretaker, create a 1/1 colorless. It's a 1/3 for 3, taps for colorless, and your other artifact creatures you control have tapped for colorless. Alright. So if you play this on 3, it taps for colorless, your other one taps for colorless, and if you had stuff on 1 or 2 that taps for colorless, that can be a lot of ramp right there. Especially because it's, I mean, you're not attacking with them, but, I mean, you can go from 3 mana to... I mean, with the right deck, you can almost go to 7 or 8. Platinum Savior is a 7 mana flash flying 7/7. Jeez. As long as Platinum Savior entered this turn, permanents you control have indestructible. You can't lose the game, your opponents can't win the game. Damage that would reduce your life total to less than 7 causes it to become 7 instead. It does cost 7. I almost wish it was like if you cast it, but I guess you do want to kind of chain... reanimate into this? I don't know. Frostlight Scepter costs 1. You choose a card name other than a basic land card name. It gains add 1 mana of any color, but loses all other abilities. Okay, so it's an artifact to like hate on some utility lands here. Retrieval Trieste. I have no clue how to pronounce that. It's a vehicle, costs 2, 2/3. Tap, exile a card from a graveyard. And whenever it attacks, you can put a card exiled with it on the bottom of its owner's library if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards exiled. That's such a mouthful. You may play a copy of that card this turn. Yeah. Wow. Alright. It does a lot, and you can play copies of those cards. And so I only got crew 1. I mean, 2, just tap, exile a card, and then if you need to, you crew it up, and, you get one of those cards. Seems pretty good. Synapse Scepter costs 2, equip 2, +1/+1 for each wisdom. If there are fewer than 3 wisdom. Okay, this is kind of like a Hoots equipment, honestly. Kind of in the same space, right? It's weird that we're getting history and this one's giving wisdom. I think those two being the same kind of irks me a little bit on a design point. Brimstone Maiden, taps to create a key, but you have to exile the key at the beginning of the next end step. But when an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you can sacrifice it. If you do, you get a tap 3/3 Black Demon. Cool. Good flavor here on this artifact. Voltaic Pinion. It's a 1. It's got 1 tap. Untap another target artifact. And X tap. It becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control. Okay. What's the news on the recent Voltaic? I know we've had 1 and a 1, and then we've had Manifold. Untap another. Okay. Alright. Lands. Blast Zone is a reprint. Dismal Confluence taps for mana of colors of a permanent card in your graveyard could produce. Neat. Taps for colorless as well. I like the art on it. I'm surprised it's not an alternative art of Mana Confluence. Pretty cool. Dormant Slag Heap. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard, you get a counter on it. Neat. And 2, it becomes a 0/0. So, you know, slowly grows as you crack those treasures and those things, and it taps for colorless. I could see this seeing play. Frigid Excavation, taps for colorless, 3 tap, sack, destroy a non-basic. Unis controller get to search for basic lands. And it's got Disturb 7. It comes back as Crumbling Archaeotops, a 4/4 artifact dinosaur skeleton that when it enters, you can destroy a non-land permanent. Its controller can search for a basic land card, and it has the usual Disturbed Rider Exile. And then we have Petrified Woods. Taps for colorless, but you can tap sack to bring a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. The fact that it's untapped could be an issue. Because let's say you get some Petrified Woods, you can go tap, sack, bring back, tap, right? Because it doesn't come back tapped, right? So if you have one on the battlefield, one in the yard, if you sacrifice the first one and you bring back the other Petrified Woods, you could just keep looping and get infinite landfalls, right? Yeah, I'm gonna have to flag that one. I must just make it come back tapped, right? Or, you know, one in a tap. There's little things you could do here. Okay, moving on to Mythic. I would say we're almost done, but there's quite a few Mythic. There's some. A lot of them are just double face cards, so we just got to keep in mind on that. We've got Anariel Brimstone Paragon, 4 white, costs 1 less for each card that left the graveyard this turn, so if you manage to nuke someone's yard of at least 4 cards, it's a 4/4 flyer for white, and if a card would leave a graveyard, instead you exile it. Whenever one or more cards are exiled this way for the first time each turn, get a 4/4 white angel. Could be concerning if you know, nuke someone's yard just on the right turn. Worth keeping an eye on. Lunarch Inquisition. So these are legendary sagas that flip into very famous artifacts from across the canon and the custom multiverse, just in case you're wondering where things come from. So, if you cast it from your hand, you exile all creatures, so already as a 5 mana, it's a board wipe, and then each player brings a creature card they own exiled with it back to the battlefield, so you save your best thing, and then it flips into the Hell Vault Restored. If a non-token creature would enter and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. Spells can't be cast except from hands, and players can't bring cards from outside the game. Okay, so it locks up the people trying to cheat things in. Cool. Has the other Chronicler as a first Planeswalker. It's 2 blue, +2 up to 1 target non-land permanent phases out. It's got loyalty 4, by the way. 0 after this phase, there's an additional phase of your choice from among upkeep, draw step, or end step. I quite like that. And then -2, you get Tyr, a legendary 2/2 blue illusion with flying. And when you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, counter it, but then you sacrifice Tyr. Neat. I mean, the -2 doesn't mean you can do it right away. We've got Search for Meaning, 1 in a blue that makes a 1/1 servo artifact creature token. Then you create a token that's a copy of an artifact token you control, and then it flips into Inquirer, Humble Explorer, which is from the plane of Terra. And it's, yeah, Inquirer Roaming Rover is a card that we have in the format. It's a 1/4 that attacks each turn of Fable, and whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is probably fine. Search for Meaning. I mean, it's 2 mana, eventually get a 1/4. Maybe at 2 mana, it's kind of scary. I mean, you do get a 1/1, and then another 1/1, and then another 1/4, right? And it could even be better than the 1/1. Maybe Search for Meaning at 2 is a little cheap. Let's keep going. Arcaza's Dark Salvation, 5 black, but costs 1 less for each enchantment you control, so Curses. It's a flying lifelink trample, 6/6. There's our ways of getting a lot of enchantments, by the way, in this format, so this could cost a lot less. And then Disturb is 6 black, but has the same cost reduction. The backside is Enrapturing Grudge. Enchant the opponent, it's a curse. Beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, they have to choose one that hasn't been chosen yet. They discard 3 cards, they sack 3 non-land permanents, and then they transform Enrapturing Grudge, going back into the creature. That seems kind of nasty. I'm going to keep an eye on it, just because I know it's very easy to spam out enchantments, especially because now with Beyond the Black Wall, we have enchantment tokens, so things to keep in mind. Our next legendary saga is the Onaki Massacre, 2 black. You draw 3 cards. You may draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Once this turn, when you activate an ability of a creature or planeswalker, you can copy it any number of times. Choose new non-land targets for the copies. Each copy must have a different target. What's this showing you activate? Okay, I wonder, does it have to target? Like, if it doesn't target, you can't use it? I'll have to check. I'm pretty sure that's what it's trying to do. And then it exiles into the Anachrond Veil, which is an equipment that equips creatures or planeswalkers. Whenever the equipped creature attacks, you can activate one of its activated abilities as though none had been activated this turn. And equipped permanent is a 3/3 avatar creature with indestructible that isn't a planeswalker. So you put it on a planeswalker, it becomes a 3/3, and when it attacks, you can activate one of its loyalties. Pretty cool backside, I like it. And of course, it's the Chain Veil. So, Ghostfire Prophecy, 2 and a red. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You can play a colorless card from among them until the end of your next turn. That's both 1 and 2. And then it flips into the Dragon Scroll. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, untap the Dragon Scroll. If it's untapped this way, draw a card. And you can pay 2 red, tap, discard a card to deal 3 damage to any target. See, these are really good because the sagas turn into playable stuff. It's just, can you afford to pay 3 to get a bunch of... It's until the end of your next turn on the front half. So the first turn, you're probably playing a land off of it. I mean, you play it on turn 3. Hopefully you didn't play land. I don't know. Or a 0-cost artifact. No, it's until the end of your next turn. So you can really play everything. I mean, maybe this is just so much value and then eventually you just start turning everything into burns, right? And whenever you cast a color spell on taps. Okay, I'm gonna, as always, we'll keep an eye on these sagas. Here we have Gildrang, who we've had the name before on a land, I believe, but here's the dragon itself. It's a 5 mana, 4/4 flying haste. When it attacks, put an artifact card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. If it's a creature, it's tapped and attacking. Return it to your hand and begin with the next end step. Really cool. That's really strong, especially with haste. And it doesn't have a mana value cap. I feel like you wouldn't want to be able to just drop in 7 drops for, but I guess if you get to 5 mana. Galea, Apex Progenitor, 6 green. It's a 10/10 trample. When it enters, you get 3/0/1 eggs. When it dies, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card, put it onto the battlefield. This seems just kind of nuts, right? 9 for a 10/10 trample, you get 3 eggs. They will block, and when they die, they'll turn into something huge too. I mean, at 9 mana, what? It's either in Absurd Ramp or I would guess Reanimate, but like it doesn't have an immediate impact. I don't know. We've got Itari's Rain of Blossoms, 2 and a green, scry 3, you gain 3 life, and then 2, 3, and 4 is add 1 mana of any color, and then it exiles into Royal Lotus, which is tap sack, add 3 mana of any one color, and when it leaves the battlefield, you gain 3 life and scry 3. The immediate impact of this one is a lot lower, so I think I'm higher on it, and it takes a lot longer to get to the Royal Lotus, so... Alright, we're getting down to the multicolor. We've got Angrath, Promise Flame, Planeswalker, 3 black-red for 5 loyalty. It's got +1, target player discards a card, draw a card unless a non-land card was discarded this way. Cool. You can -X to gain control of a non-land, non-Angrath permanent. Cool, with mana value X, and then it gains, when you control no Angraths, sacrifice it. And it's got an ult, -7, exile each opponent's graveyard. You get 7 red. For each card exiled this way, you can cast a copy of it. And you can use mana of any type to spend to cast it. It's got 5 starting loyalty, pretty thick. Avert the End Time, 3 white-blue as an instant. Return all other spells and all non-land permanents that entered this turn to their owner's hands. Return to the battlefield all cards and graveyards that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Neat. And then each player gains life equal to the amount of life they lost this turn, and then you exile it. Phew, okay. All other spells and non-land permanents that entered this turn to their owner's hands. Oh, non-land person enter this turn. Okay, you parse it spells and okay. Yeah, okay. It's pretty much you flip what happened this turn. Cool. Borum Kaldagar. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 line planeswalker. So a lot to read. Let's go. 4 mana for 3 loyalty. As long as your turn, he's a 3/3 dwarf shaman, indestructible with equip cost. The target it costs X less, where X is the loyalty. All right. +1, add red, you can cast an artifact card from your graveyard, and then obviously his loyalty is 4, so you can equip him with, like, just about anything. I don't like that this isn't a cap. I mean, like, essentially you're going to put all your equipments on him if you want, right? Which is fine because they fall off when it's not your turn, right? -1, you create a 1/1 colorless elemental artifact creature token, then put a weapon on it, so it's +1/+1 and equip 2. Okay, it's a 4-drop, not a 3-drop. And then minus X damage to each non-artifact creature that is not equipped. You gain X life. So you could do -3 to sweep the board for 4, or -2, keep him alive. Okay. Indestructible on the front half, so still pretty good. All right. Whew. We are down to how many cards now? 1, 2... All right, we're getting there. This is just the multicolor saga cycle. So, Bridge the Blind Eternities, 4 mana, put an artifact card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. Ugh. Yes, number 2 is sack an artifact, but that's such a cheap way of putting some pretty scary things in. So, we've tried to move those effects up to 5 mana, but... And then it flips into the Planner Bridge. You pay X, you tap, search your library for an artifact card with mana value X and exile it, then shuffle. You can cast that card during your next turn without paying its mana cost, activate only as a sorcery. I mean, it's probably fine, the fact that you have to sacrifice, but it is so trivially easy, I think, to just have like a random artifact token lying around that maybe the first one's kind of scary. And being hand or graveyard is a lot of flexibility. Clutches of the Last Life. 3 mana, 1 black green. You mill 3 cards, return a permanent card, mill this way to your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. Okay, that's balanced. It happens twice. And then it turns into an equipment that has equipped creature as Near Gabal, a 5/5 legendary black demon with trample. But you have to sacrifice a creature to equip. That seems more reasonable. End of Summer. 4 white blue, tap all non-land permanents you don't control, stun each of them. Then you create a token that's a copy of a target tapped non-land permanent. And then you exile it. Whenever it becomes it turns into the Deceiver's Folly, legendary artifact. Whenever it becomes untapped, you sack a token, and 1 and a tap, create a tap token. It's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control. Does a lot, definitely costs 6, so, you know. Engineered Apocalypse, 1 black red. Each opponent exiles a non-land permanent they control. Each opponent who can't loses 2 life. That's Saga 1. Then 2 is each opponent exiles a card from their hand. Each opponent who can't loses 2 life. And then it flips into Planner Desecrator, which is tap. Each opponent loses 2 life unless they exile a card from their hand or graveyard. They're likely to have some cards in the yard to fuel that. This one seems more fair. Fiend's Fetters is 1 blue black. Again, it's the Saga. It makes a 2/2 colorless gargoyle with Defender and Flying on the first one. Then you mill 3 cards, an opponent exiles a card milled this way, and you bring another one of them back to your hand. So far, so good. And then it flips into a Defender Flying 2/3 Legendary Gargoyle, was an artifact. Creatures you control can attack players with no cards in their graveyard as though they didn't have Defender, and have tap, target player exiles a card from their graveyard. Pretty interesting. Hard to parse. Again, the fact that like they start, and then the ones that turn into creatures especially feel pretty good, because you get the first body and then another body, so something to keep in mind. High Orator Tormus is white-black for a 2/2 legend. Once each turn, when you cast an enchantment spell, you create a Grudge, which is a black curse that just has, you know, a beginning of their upkeep, they lose a life. And then you can pay Disturb to bring back Tormus into a Planeswalker. Has the Disturb text, though, if it will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, you exile him instead. Plus, Disturb is what, 3 white-black, so 5 mana. +1 is mill 2 cards. This turn, you may cast an enchantment card from your graveyard. -1 is create a Grudge. And -2, you exile a non-land permanent with mana value equal to or less the number of enchantments you control, and it's got loyalty 4. A lot of stuff going on there. Just the front half is fine. When you cast an enchantment spell, Grudge your opponent. We have Meditate Upon Conquest. It's 2 blue, black, red. It's a legendary saga. Each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker, discards a card at 1. Then you draw a card and you bring a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard back to your hand. And it flips into Elder Spirit Gem, which is a legendary artifact with all loyalty abilities of planeswalkers on the battlefield. This one's kind of exciting. We've got Seek Creation here. This is obviously going to be Arcadize the Maker's Egg. It's 2 green, white. You choose one. This is going to be the first 3... saga abilities. So it's choose one, create a white legendary creature token with these additional characteristics. So either it's a 2/1 flyer named Leland, that's fine, a 3/2 red orc with trample, or a 2/3 green elf with vigilance. That fits into green-white, so we're fine here. And then it'll eventually flip into the Maker's Egg, which is tap, target creature control gains flying until end of turn if you control a creature with flying. And then the same is true for, you know, all the abilities, Odric style, and activate only as a sorcery. Setting Sail. I know this one very well because it references one of my cards, the Intrepid. Well, mine is Intrepid. This one is the Intrepid, as you're going to see. So Setting Sail, 1 green blue, creates a 2/2 blue scout. And then on the second one is whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player this turn, you get to tutor a land to your hand, and then it flips into a flying vehicle with power and toughness equal to the number of differently named lands you control. This one's probably really good. As a 3, I mean, that middle one has a high tendency to probably miss, and the 2/2 for 3 is low, but it flips into something pretty scary. It's got crew too. We've got the Divine Winds Descend, 1 white black, deals 3 damage to any target, you gain 3 life, then you exile up to 3 target cards from graveyards, and then it flips into the Mortal Divide. Your opponents can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless they sack a creature, exile a creature card from the graveyard, or pay 3 life as a legendary artifact. And it's the Mortal Divide from Peng Zhao, which is another Scribble set that it is in the format, so cool. Interregnum, 3 red white. If you cast a spell, each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power, so it's like a wipe, and then you put a counter on each creature you control, and then it flips into a legendary vehicle that's a 4/8 flying haste, trample, vigilance. Tap creatures you control with total toughness 4 or greater, and it becomes a creature. Yeah, it's probably fine. Again, if you're able to play a deck that can drop a 5 that does a good board wipe and then turns into this, like, you've locked it, but otherwise, you know. Alright, almost there. Zendikar's Infernal Rebirth, 2 red green, sack up to 2 lands, then draw that many cards. You can play 2 additional lands this turn. Dang. For each land card in your graveyard, then you create a 1/1 red spirit creature token, and it turns into the Lithoform Core, which is 1 tap, copy an activated ability from a land source you control. You can choose new targets. Obviously, mana abilities cannot be targeted. We've got Malachrond, the Aeonic Arbiter. It's an 8 mana, 8/8 flyer, legendary artifact creature, Elder Sphinx. When Malachrond enters, if you cast him, and it isn't an extra turn, you take an extra turn, and you control players during their extra turns. Yeah, that seems fine. Obsalath Forge Titan is a 9 mana, 9/9 legendary artifact creature, Elder Elemental. My gosh. It has trample. When it enters, for each player, look at that player's hand and the cards that player owns from outside the game. You cast one of those cards that player owns without paying its mana cost. So this one doesn't have the if you cast, right? Yeah. So if you can cheat that in, you get any card from your sideboard or from your hand, and you cast it without paying its mana cost. I'm sure there's something really dumb you could do, like what? You throw 3 other Obsalaths into the sideboard. There's probably something you can do. I'm just gonna keep an eye on it, because if you have anything in the sideboard that is immune to being interacted with, and you can reanimate this, and then, like, for example, if you reanimate Obsalath, you can get any other reanimate target as well. So you've got a 9/9 on top of your best reanimate target if you put one in the sideboard, right? Interesting. Okay, well, I wrote it down. Stonesire Agnamis is 5 for a 5/5 legendary artifact creature, Elder Dwarf. When Stonesire enters, search your library for a card that can produce colorless, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And whenever you spend 1 or more colorless to cast a spell, you create a 0/0 colorless dwarf army artifact creature token, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on it for each colorless that was spent. I think that's fine as a 5/5 for 5. I mean, the Enter the Battlefield is really good. Like, that can get a lot of lands. And we have no mythic lands. Whew, lot to see here. There's a decent number of cards that are on my watch list. Again, it tends to happen when you move up to the rares and the mythics, the cards that just do so much. Obviously, you need to keep an eye on those, because the sheer amount of value you can get, especially on some of these 2 mana or 3 mana sagas. I'm happy to see that Smelt is finally at a place where I think I can accept it. Everything else that I've noted, I think Scribbl's seen some of these before, but there's a lot to like here. The flavor is really cool, and I wish this set a lot of luck. And with that said, that was Anachrond Reforged. So stay tuned. I think now it's just approaching 3 p.m. I think I might be able to knock one final set out. I think I'm definitely not going to do more than 4 today. So with that said, thank you for following along if you have been, and hopefully see you in the next video.